victory demands conviction. One way or the other, you need to walk the path of truth. Well, good morning, everyone. 26 of us returned from Southern California on Friday after 5 days of a pilgrimage to the places where Yogananda lived and taught. And to paraphrase a charming tongue-in-cheek sentence from the autobiography, fresh from the plane, a euphemism merely, we were tired but happy. And for those of you who know that sentence. But it's interesting how this reading and message today fits very nicely, at least I feel, in my experience this last week, and I think with many of us. For one thing, you know, when you go on a pilgrimage and you go to these sacred, oh, very good, there's some of our slides. You remember a thing I said, but anyway. And so, I lost my train of thought suddenly. But when you go to very sacred places and you go inward, and that's your intention, and the vibration of those places endorse that intention, what happens, what we experience, and I've experienced it many times, whether in India or Southern California, and I think all of us did, was a suspension of time. And so, and I seeing Jaidara just returning from India after 3.5 weeks, you know, it's, for us, it was only 5 days, but it seemed like forever. And so the blessings there are deeply profound. But I noticed here in listening to Rika's reading the rays from the book there, the message, that we contrast. You know, I come not to bring peace. I come with the sword, with the Bhagavad Gita at the end, in which the yogi sees all things, all phenomenal objects and experiences as expressions of the one. So how do we reconcile that? And during this trip, this last week, there was one theme that came to me that I want to share with you. For one part of it is that it takes commitment to achieve success in any department of life worth striving for. It's as if our conscience is the voice of our soul. I mean, if you have a guilt complex, the voice of your soul is a little bit muddied by the voice of the subconscious. But nonetheless, that voice that calls us to aspire to goodness, to health, to harmony, to success, even material success. That voice is our karma, of course, speaking our duty in life, and it varies by each of us. But it calls us to awaken, and some would say struggle, but others would say to make the effort, okay? And yet, in the transcendent state of inner peace, in the vibration that many of us experienced this last week at these blessed holy shrines, all of that sort of vanishes. Now, I think for many people who visit these places, and many of us, the 26 of us, there were 8 from Portland, 1 from Ananda member from Ananda Houston, and the rest of us from this center here. But I think there's one thing that stands out typically, which is the opportunity groups have. I don't know how many individuals who visit Yogananda's headquarters on the top of Mount Washington overlooking downtown Los Angeles as if to bless the city of angels with the power of an angel. I don't know how many people get upstairs to the 3rd floor to visit Master's rooms, but I know Padma and I, and many of you have been there. You step into that space, and it's a wormhole into an infinite reality. Words don't really do it justice, but there's a power there. This time for me, I looked at Master's overstuffed chair there, and it was draped in one of his ochre-colored shawls, and I felt power. I don't mean, that's a strange word in the English language to say power, but strength, you know, just, yes, willpower, but in a divine way. This person, this great soul, this avatar was a man of great accomplishments, and in his presence, people naturally, who felt attuned, naturally would become still. Naturally, even, I think of the monastics there, obedience, humility, okay, stillness, self-offering. That energy, the same energy that is creates, sustains, and dissolves this great universe that we live in, was sort of was focused there, and I felt it just emanating out. If they would have let me, and I'll get into that here in a minute, I'd have fallen to my knees and pronam for sure, prostrate, but they don't let you do such things there. In any case, you feel something. And then in his bedroom, which adjoins it, it was just peaceful. I mean, what else could a bedroom be of an avatar, right? Just waves of silent inner peace. So that experience is, you know, what that is. There are 5 sites there. There's the Gardens of Encinitas, there's the Mount Washington headquarters, which was the first property he got, and then there was Lake Shrine, which was the last property he developed, Hollywood Church, where our founder, Swami Kriyananda, as a young monk, began his ministry. And then we also went to Forest Lawn, just a few minutes away, where Yogananda's body remains interred there in this beautiful, amazing place that the Forest Lawn people have created. And then, as an aside, we also visited what's called the Temple of Joy, which is the home of Casey Hughes and his partner, and it's very lovely. It was a place where we got to do our meditations in Encinitas. Now, what's interesting that came to me in this experience, and I'll say a little bit about the places just briefly. Many of you have been there. More of you know about them. But Encinitas was acquired while Yogananda went back to India in 1935-36. He basically really knew what was going on, but he pretended he didn't, because he had had a vision before he left India of 3 locations, and a beachside hermitage was one of those locations. Anyway, so when he got back, his chief disciple, Rajarsi Janakananda, whose work in his life as a great devotee and a realized soul was to help support financially Yogananda's fledgling work in America. And so Rajarsi built this beautiful hermitage on the bluff overlooking the vast Pacific Ocean. It's quite beautiful. And then over time, these incredible gardens were built. We only were able to visit the gardens. I've only once been allowed to enter the hermitage and see the room where Yogananda wrote the autobiography of a yogi. And for the sake of Bruce here today, he also wrote the Rubaiyat interpretations. Anyway, it's the beauty of all of the 5 locations that SRF manages and so on is beyond compare. And the power of the vibration of those places is also beyond compare. Basically, they're doing something quite beautiful, inwardly, outwardly. It's really a museum. And, you know, Divine Mother, as she manifests this universe, does so in 3 different ways and forms. One is the outgoing creative thing, the other is to preserve, and the other one is to dissolve and clear the veils of duality towards transcendence. And so their role in the great work of Yogananda and the lineage of the masters is to preserve these beautiful places. And you see the renunciates, and the women wear these beautiful saris, and they're all neat and prim, and the monks or brothers, whatever they are, wear these simple shirts and so forth. They're all very kind and humble and inward, and it's that sort of perfect vision of monasticism and so forth, with the beautiful vibration there. Of course, what goes on behind closed doors is that people are people, and there's a high turnover among the monks and nuns, and most of them are from foreign countries, which tells me that Americans don't obey, they're not humble, and they're anything but still and not restless. Anyway, that's my observation, take it or leave it. But anyway, it's beautiful, and they're doing a beautiful thing. However, all you get to do is go to the museum and see it and be inspired. But do you live that way? Do you aspire to be a monk or nun? Do you live with humility, calmness, inner peace, with obedience to what the Guru has given us? Obedience to your own conscience, not to mention anything. Not so much, I'd say. So it's a beautiful gift that they have for us. And then I reflected on that. Here we are at Ananda. We're all a little bit crazy. We've got these communities, and Swami was the only one who took up the challenge that Master gave all the way to the end of his life, that intentional communities would be a way of life into the future. I mean, not for everybody, of course, but really as a new age form of monasteries, a new age form of ashrams, where people of all states of life, householders and renunciates and single people, etc., old and young, from every different background, could live together and serve in harmony. I want to segue here. We had the opportunity to see a couple of films that I had never seen before. And the one I want to mention was a film without an audio track, unfortunately, but it was a film of Master, of Yogananda, dedicating the Hollywood Temple, 1942, I think it was August 30th, if I remember. And he was, those of you who have been there, I mean, it looks sort of like this. There's a dais, and he's sitting there, and he's, in his yoga finery and so forth, and he's sitting in a sort of a low chair. And beside him on one side is the future governor of California, and on the other side is the consul general from Los Angeles, Indian consulate, and so on, a man who later was present for Yogananda's Mahasamadhi 10 years later. Anyway, so they're there. And so instead of the things we see on YouTube where he's looking into the camera, he knows he's being filmed, this was him interacting with a number of people and in just his own way. I had never seen his facial features, which were very distinctly, to my mind, Bengali, interestingly enough, but that's a trivial point. But and he was he was not only the master of ceremonies, but he was the master of in a way, publicity. He had the chief of police from Los Angeles there, and he'd have these people come up, and he had these ribbons, he'd put them on their neck, and so the chief of police got some award for, I don't know, racial integration or something. And then some actors came up from some movie that nobody knows, have ever heard of, and he, So now normally if I was the host to something and I was awarding people, I'd stand up and do it. The whole time he sat in the chair, and he was really the guru, even with these people for whom they were not the guru. And to see the expressions on people's faces, like the lieutenant governor and Mr., looking at him, with each person that he interacted with, he was loving, but also very perceptive. There was no sort of personality there. It was like a window. And his facial features would change. It was most remarkable. I just have never seen anything like that before. Hollywood Church, yeah.
They played a movie.
It was a movie, yeah, a video. And so, but what touched me there, besides what I've already said, is the fact that in his life, he was dynamic. He barnstormed across the country year after year. He's come to Seattle twice. Most of those early years after he purchased Mount Washington, 1925, most of those years he wasn't even there. He put other people in charge. He'd come back for Christmas and so forth. You know, he had a pilot program with intentional communities during the 40s. He tried to start a school at Mount Washington, but it didn't quite work out either. The parents weren't ready to send their kids there. He had a carrot juice processing plant in Encinitas. He had a farm, and in the Hollywood Church that was dedicated, upstairs and on the street, Sunset Boulevard no less, was a mushroom burger cafe. In the 40s. Oh, mushroom burgers? I mean, you know, this was LA. And he was out there. He had billboards of his own picture, and he sold photographs of his own picture at his lectures, which were attended by thousands of people. But what happened? After his passing in '52, and after the passing of his male successors, one after the other, the monastics took over and created a museum. It's beautiful, but it's a museum. You know, when you go to a museum, you're supposed to be quiet. So we were quiet. One of our members made the mistake of sitting on the floor in a chapel and was told immediately to get up and sit in a chair. Okay? So there were different situations where people were reprimanded in nice tones and so forth. But you know, if you're in a museum, you should be quiet. You don't make a fuss. And thousands of people go to these different places. And if they didn't do any of that, people would be doing yoga out on the lawn or energizing and doing all sorts of things to attract attention to themselves. And to keep the holy vibration of these places, it needs to be still. And you need to go there to take the most of it, to be still and quiet. It makes perfect sense. It's what they do, and it's who they are. Okay. But it isn't what Yogananda was in the way that Ananda, following the example and leadership of Swami Kriyananda, who lived with Yogananda in those last years of his life. We've had restaurants, we have farms, we have all the same things. And then there was one other place we went to, and that was Casey Hughes' Little Temple of Joy. Some of you have been there. It's very sweet. He imported from Indonesia this temple. It's just outrageous. It's really beautiful. But he's he sees himself as a bridge between Ananda and SRF. That's not really true, but that's how he sees himself. And so, whereas SRF sort of represents the Vishnu aspect, preserving everything just the way it was. And whereas Ananda represents the Brahma vibration of Divine Mother, Casey sort of represents the Shiva. He doesn't have any institution, any organization. He has all these things on his altar from all over the place. It's very eclectic. It's very universal. You know, Master called his Hollywood church the Church of All Religions. But the monk there explained they got rid of that because nobody really knows what a Church of All Religions. And I get that. Because is it just a bunch of, do you go there and all the religions are doing stuff? Or is it sort of a new religion that has pieces of everything? What is it? And it's not that. What Master meant by the Church of All Religions is that the only religion there really is the awakening of the soul. And the practice of the inward practice of meditation, essentially, even if you don't know any, the mystics of East and West all had that awakening of Kundalini into spirit. That's the real. Yogananda said someday self-realization, understood in this sense, not an institutional sense, would be the religion of Dwapara Yuga. all the forms would remain. They'd probably still have Catholics and Protestants and Hindus and Muslims and all that. But people would, in their consciousness, realize it's about their personal experience and relationship with God. And so all three aspects of Divine Mother's presence in this world are represented in these three different ways. The thing is, though, unless you have a little bit of some, even if one is dominant, you're going to ossify. And so SRF has a new initiative for a lay disciple order and for what they call community. Ananda, Swami Kriyananda, started a religious order years ago, the Sevaka order, for example. As for Casey, well, you know, being universal doesn't have the kind of magnetism. You don't know what it is, so it's just him and his partner Anka. You know, it's just, I've been to interfaith services and they generally lack magnetism because everybody gets up and talks about their way as the great way, and when you're done, it's like, oh, what do I do with that? And no, victory demands conviction. One way or the other, you need to walk the path of truth. You need to make some commitment or nothing. This spiritual but not religious way of thinking, which I'm all for, but unfortunately is all too often expressed by doing nothing, is not the true path. And so this experience gave to all of us the power of Master's presence, which is being preserved there. As I say, Mount Washington, I think, is really the heart and soul of it. Encinitas has, you know, where he wasn't there as many years, but it's very beautiful. At one point I prayed and asked Master, are you still here? And then we had this this older monk who'd been around, what, 50 years was it? I think he said. Anyway, he was really charming, and he talked to us in this little St. Francis circle, and he gave us little holy cards and stuff. It was very sweet. And then later, when everybody else had went down to Swami's beach, I wanted to stay and meditate for the afternoon. And so finally I had to go. So I went to retrieve the van. I was one of the van drivers. By the way, I worked out all the karma in my life to ever be a bus driver. I'm done. And so I went out to the van, and what was his name? Brother Joseph, right? And so Brother Joseph comes running out of one of the nearby houses where the monks live with a big bucket like this, you know. I'm thinking, oh my God, what's he going to do, throw the bucket at me? And in it was crabgrass. You don't know what it is? Okay. All right. He had been down by the caves that are in the hill and the bluff overlooking the ocean. And he had been harvesting this crabgrass, and he wanted us as Ananda to have this crabgrass harvested from Encinitas. I mean, it was the most charming thing. How do you get crabgrass in an airplane? I don't know. But it was so sweet, I just thanked him, and we chatted for a little bit, and I put it in the van. And then on our closing night, what was that, Thursday night, Sita cut up, and we did a little offering for everybody. I brought my little stick of crabgrass home. So, you know, we had all of these very, you know, special interactions with people there. And even Casey's is, you know, he's an unusual fellow. I've known him for years, casually. And it's nice for us to meditate there, because, you know, when you go into SRF's place, especially as a group, you're not going to be allowed to meditate, you know, the way you would want to. You're in their home. I get that. And so at Hollywood, the monk there let us meditate for a few minutes. It wasn't very long. But, you know, they just don't want people taking over. It's their home. And if you went to somebody's home, you wouldn't do the things that I would like to do. So that was fine. And so where else? You know, Lake Shrine was the last project of Master's life, outwardly, you know, in that way. And it's incredibly beautiful. But let me finish with Hollywood Church, where we watched the videos. they told lots of charming stories, some of which we know from Swami's life and his autobiography, The New Path, like the story about the stained glass and the story about the blue carpet. I won't repeat the stories, and other stories were told there. Swami, as a young monk, helped with the construction of India House. What I didn't know that was explained is without getting a permit back in the day, the monks went underneath the building where the Mushroom Burger house was on Sunset Street, and they dug out a basement by hand, and it's huge. I don't know how they did it. It must have been very challenging. But lots of miraculous stories attend these different places. But Lake Shrine, getting back to that, was the last of it. And Swamiji tells the story, in his autobiography, but Master would send the monks out there in a truck, in a pickup truck, every day to work on preparing it for the opening dedication, which was in 1950. Again, the Lieutenant Governor attended that opening as well. And so obviously there's some connection there between them spiritually. I don't know what it was. But anyway, so it's very, very beautiful. Master went swimming in the lake and floated out there, seemingly in samadhi, for quite a time. I think the monk we talked to said 45 minutes or so, and infused the water with that divine light. The fellow who hosted us, there were two people that we met who had their beginnings of the spiritual path from Ananda, and then later went to SRF and became monastics. Actually three, but that's a different story. We met two on this trip. And this fellow was Italian, and very charming, and as you know, Italians tend to be very charming, and vivacious. And he remembered me from Lake Como in 1984? Yeah, 1984. Ananda's work in Europe started up in the foothills of the Alps in Lake Como, in the Lake District of Italy, and in a villa that one of the members allowed us to use for maybe a year, not more than 2 years. Anyway, so this fellow was there. He was very young, obviously, at the time. And so he was welcoming us quite warmly. It was wonderful, and had lots of stories and so forth. And he took us up. Later they built this sort of like a temple of light thing up there, and then they have a retreat house for people to visit. But Lake Shrine is really I don't personally feel as much up there, but the Lake Shrine itself, the only place outside India where there's a little bit of Mahatma Gandhi's ashes there, and then the little chapel where Master would go and give services, and so on the last day of his life, the day before he departed, he visited each of the little centers around there, and he was touring Benai Sen, the recently appointed ambassador to America, and he wanted to show him his places. But really what was happening beneath was he was basically saying goodbye to the renunciates, the staff. And they could feel, we were told, that something was off, something was different. But it was veiled from people, as Swami himself says, that he was about to check out. He was about to leave. So we went around and very sweetly blessed everybody and gave them things. So in that chapel, which I really loved meditating there, I really felt Master's presence there as well. Here's the thing, thousands and thousands of people. I've met Ananda members over the years who lived in that area, Pacific Palisades, and would go there not knowing really what it was. And that happens in Encinitas too. You see tourists, you could see that they have nothing to do, by the way they're dressed and their behavior, that they're not necessarily meditators. But thousands of people go to Lake Shrine and Encinitas especially. So and that was a very blessed experience. Then at the end, I was talking to some other monk who walked up, and I was about to drive the van off, and so I asked him, well, whatever happened to the idea of moving Master's body from a forest lawn where it's interred? And I'll comment on that in just a moment. And he said, there's been no change in plans. SRF still, he said, would like to move his body to Mount Washington. But if you drive up there, oh my God, the streets. One time we went with a giant bus, and it was just a disaster. I had to jump out of the bus and direct the driver to get around these corners, and we just had 3 12-passenger vans, and that was sweet. We could maneuver ourselves. I doubt they'll ever get permission to. He said that they had planned a very small footprint of a mausoleum for Master on the Mount Washington grounds down into the forest. But truthfully, I think it needs to be, down in Encinitas on PCA, on the highway there, plenty of land, and it could be really big and beautiful, but they haven't asked my opinion, so I keep it to myself. Anyway, so Forest Lawn, is where his body is. And it's a magnificent place. A lot of celebrities, Hollywood celebrities, are buried there, and other people, I'm sure. And as a piece of art, it's not just a cemetery. In the crypts, these incredibly large buildings that you walk into it just takes your breath away. So the 26 of us, went into this little hallway where his body is, and I forgot all about, there's Lajana, okay. I keep forgetting that's up there. And so meditating there where his body is, I think for many of us, very profound. I really can't put it to words, but I mean, you go up to the little marble thing, and it's sort of like he's right there. It's pretty amazing. So we meditated and chanted and sang there as our groups often do. So that's very special. I don't think I've omitted anything, have I? No, okay, good. But overall, I just realized how, with a greater appreciation perhaps than I've ever had, how what's going on there, the sort of museum curating aspect of things, I'm deeply appreciative. It'd be so easy to change. Some things change. Those buildings are getting so old. I wouldn't want to be the maintenance man or whatever. It's thinking of Rick over there. But it's a beautiful thing. What we're doing is a beautiful thing, because the vibration and teachings of self-realization are intended by Babaji and the lineage to go out into the world and to do new ways of living pertinent to our new way of thinking in this age. And at the same time, not to get attached to the forms, not to be sectarian. At the same time, to understand that what it is in the essence is universal. It is for everyone. Lahiri Mahashai gave Kriya to Muslims and Hindus and Christians and all sorts of different Hindu sects within India without regard to caste or class and that kind of thing. This is our consciousness, in America especially. And so all three are necessary, and any particular reflection of this teaching needs to have, at least to some degree, all three components, or it loses attunement with the vibration that we're attempting to represent and attune ourselves to. So we had a wonderful trip, and just to say it, when you go with the group, you get certain privileges and certain experiences which are really blessed. But then if you ever go back on your own or with one other person, then you can get away with meditating in these places unobtrusively when you're not in a group. So I thought to myself, yeah, that would be great to go back there and meditate in the Temple of Leaves on Mount. I just really felt Master. He used to sit there and teach the monks and give little classes out there under the tree, like Christine has created right out here, the Temple of Leaves. So, you know, there's advantages. What I'm saying is to go with the group, you know, has a certain power and energy, and then to also go on your own and experience it. But victory spiritually does demand that commitment in one form or another. Okay.